Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome to the bonus show. Positive China story today. China has lifted, I believe it's a 14-year ban on consoles. Why were consoles banned in the first place? When just about all of the components in those consoles are made in China? Good question. It was because, of course, China was afraid that video games and these consoles would damage the minds of Chinese youth.
Now, that's interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one is that there are actually concerns over the effects of just playing too many video games on kids. At the same time, there is a lot of evidence that a lot of types of video games, Lewis, actually enhance hand-eye coordination in children, especially when they start playing at a young age. They develop certain motor skills far faster. So it's actually an issue which is pretty heavily discussed, researched, and debated.
Right, and we even talked about video games being used with the elderly and improving their coordination, improving their memory, you name it. And of course, there's no link between violent behavior and playing video games, and all of those things the critics like to bring up have all been dismissed.
Let me add one thing, which is I actually have continued to research the link between violent video games and real-world violence. There is some new research, and I'm still reading it all. A lot of people have sent me this stuff, including some professors who have researched this. There is some research now that suggests playing violent video games may actually have an effect on real-world violence. However, that's separate from saying that just because you blow someone up with an RPG in a video game, you would be ready to commit that level of violence in the real world. But it could make you more aggressive and more likely to get into a fist fight, for example. There are now some conflicting sets of research about this, but we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, in the future.
All right. Well, I hope that research extends to all countries in which video games are played frequently, because I think if we just focus on the U.S., where we're not going to accomplish too much. Things are just too crazy here. But apart from that, the financial aspect of this is interesting now. Of course, these consoles are going to be very expensive. Most Chinese youth are not even going to be able to afford the consoles, let alone all of these expensive games. And for 14 years now, the focus has been on PC gaming, on free gaming, and on free mobile gaming.
I actually recently had a conversation, Lewis, with a friend of mine that you also know that we grew up with, who is half Chinese, okay? And we were just reminiscing about things, and we actually talked about how when he was growing up, he had a Chinese, it was almost like a fake Nintendo that had almost like not pirated, but reconfigured games with all Chinese characters, Nintendo games, and it was something they had gotten in China. Now, of course, this was more than 14 years ago. This was probably like in the early and mid 90s, and this ban sounds like it started in 1999, more or less, or 2000. And it's just funny that I recently talked to him about that, and now you're covering this story.
Yeah, of course, pirated games are a big thing there. And so we're not really sure how it's going to work, but the potential, of course, is incredible just because of China's population.
I was also, Lewis, interesting China story. It seems like tastes in China are evolving quite a bit as buying power is increasing, because even though there is much poverty in China, because there's just so many people, the number of people in the middle class is growing very, very quickly. And I watched a documentary on sustainable tuna farming, and a big part of that is different sushi markets, of course. And it turns out that now the Chinese, based on increased buying power, are developing quite a taste for raw fish, right? Sashimi, Japanese-style fish preparations, which were not very popular in China before. So it's interesting that now we're seeing things happening that just seems to relate to increased buying power, even though, as you say, the consoles will be too expensive for many Chinese. It won't be too expensive for everybody.
Right. Things are changing there quickly. I'd love to visit someday, but I don't really care about the cities. I want to see the countryside. There's a lot there, a lot to see. All right, let's talk about cats. David is not a cat fan. True?
I am not. If you ask me, am I a dog person or a cat person? Then certainly I would say that I am a dog person. The other day I met a cat that was okay, and yeah, wasn't bad. But I'm definitely a dog person.
All right. David has admitted to me that he doesn't think cats are very smart as well.
Incorrect. What I have said is that I think dogs are smarter, and that cats just don't really care to do the type of stuff that dogs are driven to do.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you were pretty convinced that my cat did not even know its own name, right?
I wasn't sure. You're right. I was definitely questioning it. I was not questioning whether cats know their names broadly, but I wasn't sure whether your cat knew its name.
Because, we'd be in the house and David would be like, Rocco. And the cat would not even bat an eye, not turn its head, not react in any way whatsoever. And he's like, see? And, sometimes even when I'd call Rocco, even though I was his favorite, very rarely, he'd usually turn his head to me, but sometimes he wouldn't do that. And I said, no, I mean, that's cats. I mean, they hear you. They know my voice. They know their name. Cats just don't care. Cats own you. Like the cats are the masters of the house. And new research is proving that that's basically the case, that they do recognize your voice. They do recognize their name. For some reason, they just don't care. They just don't want to acknowledge you. And because my cat, I knew this was the case before this. I had a lot of experience with cats. And my cat, you could move any plastic bag, any piece of plastic, any plastic wrapper in the house, and the cat would not care. But as soon as you took out the deli meat bag and you moved that little thick plastic wrapper that was around the deli meat, the cat would be right next to you, begging for a piece of that meat. So
now, but even you could still make the argument, though, Lewis. I'm not saying that cats don't know their names. I believe you that they do and that the study is right. And by the way, if you are watching the bonus show, we do apologize for Lewis's video issues. We can hear Lewis great, but for some reason looking like some kind of pixelated, almost like an Andy Warhol type painting or something like that. But just because a cat recognizes sounds that it associates with food does not prove necessarily that they are capable of recognizing individually their name versus someone saying a different word. I'm not telling you you're wrong about what you're saying. Obviously, I believe the study, but I'm saying the deli paper example alone is not really proof of anything.
Okay. I find it an interesting anecdote, but my cat definitely knew his name. And there was all sorts of research here being done on cats. Things like when they rub up against you, a lot of people think that that's some sign of affection. They're really just marking their territory.
Yeah, I didn't think people still thought that it was a sign of affection. I remember learning at a pretty young age that they're marking stuff with the oil on their skin.
No, a lot of people I talked to, even some lifetime cat owners, were pretty much unaware of that fact.
Huh.
And apparently, when a cat sits and stares at you and blinks, it's a sign of affection. If the cat isn't blinking, it means the total opposite. So I had not realized that. My cat was not a huge starer, but I have noticed that cats tend to do that. And there's also all sorts of interesting facts. And they even talk about how if you die in your house, there's a good chance your cat will eat you if you go unnoticed. Which is kind of disturbing.
That's absolutely horrific. See, that's why I like dogs better. When people have died, there's lots of evidence that the dogs will hang out and even hang out at the grave and stuff like that. It seems like a very different dynamic there, Lewis.
Well, here's one other bit of research. A lot of these researchers believe that cats just have not yet reached the level of domestication of dogs. And so their behavior in many ways is largely due to that. But who knows? It's all in the air, I guess. Here's a story about a Kentucky lawmaker who accidentally discharged her weapon in the state building. This is Leslie, Kentucky. What's her name? Leslie. Geez, I got it right here. It's not a Republican. It's a Democrat, believe it or not. Leslie Combs, and she's a state representative. Is my video still going crazy?
Oh, we're doing okay right now, Lewis. Certainly you can proceed with the story.
Okay. Leslie Combs, she brought her gun into the building, going to work as usual, I guess. A lot of employees check their guns. She, I guess, took it out, was going to check it, started fiddling with it, who knows, and it went off. And what she said was, oh, I'm a gun owner. It happens. False. It does not happen. As we talked about, any accidental discharge is a negligent discharge.
Yeah, the idea that gun owners know that your gun just firing sometimes when you don't intend it to is just going to happen sometimes. It's like saying, I buy fruit. Every once in a while, you're going to get a piece of fruit that's overripe and you got to throw it out. If you're going to be in the fruit eating game, then there's going to be some fruit you have to throw out. It's like saying, well, we're going to have guns, and every once in a while, there's just going to be accidental firings, and that's just fine. It's just part of what being a gun owner is.
Right. Now, we have friends that are gun owners, and I know that if either one of them had this happen, it would be possibly the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to them in their lives. I also predict that it will never happen to them because they are actual, responsible, intelligent gun owners.
Some more than others, I think.
Okay, well, I think that those negligent discharges would never happen with them. But here you have a lawmaker who clearly thinks that it's okay for this type of thing to happen, is a gun owner herself, supports the Second Amendment in her own way, whatever that means, and is going to pass legislation based on her own beliefs, even though she is a completely negligent gun owner. This is terrifying.
It is absolutely terrifying. Party designation aside, this is just a disaster. We have such a problem with guns. I mean, a lot of the responses did the story yesterday about the police who killed the 90-pound schizophrenic kid who had been tasered and was being held down by two cops. And you suggested, Lewis, quite astutely, do police really even have to have guns? It might be better if they didn't. One of the reasons why it would be tough to make the case that police shouldn't have guns is that so many people have guns. In countries where police don't ordinarily carry guns, a big part of that is because there's just very few guns in circulation, and there is not nearly as high of a chance that a perpetrator or would-be perpetrator is going to have a gun. It would be completely unfeasible here in the United States.
Perhaps. Yeah, perhaps it would be. I don't think it will ever happen. I think there are plenty of non-lethal alternatives, and you can always have the guys with guns on standby, like a SWAT team. A lot of countries do that. But I don't know. It's just with the police brutality and excessive force, it's getting completely out of control. It seems like once a week we have a story about cops either doing something or killing someone recklessly and ruthlessly, or doing nothing in situations where they should be doing something despite having guns. So crazy stuff. Leslie Combs, an idiot. If you live in Kentucky and you are a Democrat, don't re-elect Leslie Combs. You're probably better off with whatever Republican is running against her, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, but before taking Lewis's advice, just check on that, because it actually could be even worse if you're like, maybe just a different Democrat might be a better idea, or maybe an independent, at the state level. Hey, by the way, Lewis, final reminder, the Indiegogo campaign launches Monday to upgrade to 5 shows a week. Please contact me if you want to make an early contribution over the weekend. The early contributions help get things going. They encourage more people to donate once the campaign officially starts, and I've got a list of people already who want to do that. So email me, and then you will get the link over the weekend instead of having to wait until Monday.
Thank you, David. See you all next week.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.